Oh, hi. I'm sorry, I didn't see you. How are you?
I'm fine, Katarina. How about you?
I'm good too, thank
Good.
you.
Thank you.
I have a little bit of a cold, but apparently it's not COVID. I tested negative.
Oh, okay,
um,
good. Good, good.
yeah, thank you for coming. And you found, you check. Like, there's not too much to know about the app. Um, there's a way of direct messaging. So above the microphone, there's this paper airplane.
Mm-hmm.
I'll
Yep.
I'll write you a
Right.
hey on there.
Yep.
So and then there's a whole chat room, but you don't really have to take care of that. I'll check while you speak. All the way on the left, there's like a speech bubble, and if you click on that, there's the room chat option. So if people have questions but don't make you be in a noisy place and so on, they will comment on that chat instead of coming up here and talk. So
Okay.
yeah, but
Whatever you prefer. Yeah, it's up to you.
okay. And we'll wait like 5 to 6 minutes if that's okay, and to give people time to come.
Sure.
Um, and then I'll introduce you, and then we go from there.
Thank you, Katarina.
Hi, how are you?
Hi, everybody.
Dennis, meet Dr.
Yes.
Pascalis. So I want to make sure I say your name right. Um, Pascalis Gkoupidenis.
Correct. Correct. Absolutely
Uh,
correct.
thank you. Thank you so
And
much.
I know it's difficult, but you got it.
I have been. So I. Yeah. Um, so your name is Greek, right? So
Yeah. Correct. Correct.
when the once to Greece, and it was very nice.
Okay. Good. Good. So yeah.
Oh,
So I have this weird combination of letters at the beginning, which is not really necessary in English, but it's a translation from Greek.
okay.
So only G is enough at the beginning.
Oh, only G. Oh, okay, good. Yeah,
Yeah.
thank you.
Does your name have a meaning?
If you go back in Slavic and in ancient Greek, it means a slow person, literally.
Well, you're definitely breaking the mold on that. My name means the sea in Turkish.
Oh, okay, good.
So we'll get started briefly. I'm going to start pinging some people in, and we'll have a great Saturday together.
So, hello, Doctor. Is it Gkoupidenis, or how do I say that?
Correct, Kubidenis.
Gkoupidenis. So, I'm
Yep.
very excited on the topic. It projects well onto some very current interests. So, I really look forward to talking about it.
Thank you, Serena.
I also went to Greece once, and this was in the 80s. And I was going to go to Mykonos, but I got on the wrong boat and ended up in Paros. But I stayed there a week and had a great time.
No, I think Paris is even better. I mean, it's less crowded, so it's if you really want to enjoy a combination of sea and people and nightlife, it's much better than Mykonos, I think.
Yeah, it was a wonderful time.
Yeah, nice.
I took 2 trips to Greece and I love them both. The eggs that you can get there are just, it's no comparison to what you can get in the US.
But did
Well,
you
I
say,
was
Dennis, the eggs?
Yeah, the chicken eggs.
Oh,
I
really?
don't remember which island I was on. It was on the west side, but we
Mainland
stayed.
or in an island?
It was an island.
Hmm.
It was one of the. There's limited amount of islands on the west side compared to to south or the east. But we stayed at a villa, I guess you'd call it, and
Yep.
the people who were hosting us, they had chickens on property, and they would bring them to us every morning. And the color of the yolk and just the flavor, it was, yeah. And the food in Greece is amazing.
Yeah, yeah. This is one thing that I miss here in Germany. To be honest with you,
When was the last time you were back to Greece?
I mean it's easy from here. So the last time was last summer.
What was your
So almost,
what
yeah.
was your favorite culinary experience?
In Greece, you mean, eh?
When you last visited?
Oh, to see my friends back. So I'm from a small city in the north, really in the north. So we are far away from the sea. So at least 2 or 3 hours drive. And in the winter it can be very cold. So it's snowing every day, every winter. So it's not how you imagine it. But for me, because of Corona time, I had a lot of time. I mean, to see my friends back and to sit together as we used to do. I mean, to sit together in a table and have really long chats and drink together. So it was really nice for me. Yeah,
Were you all drinking ouzo, or is there something more specific in your region?
it's so also it's good. I mean, the night that you drink it, but it's not really enjoyable the next morning. So be, because of the anise
Oh,
mostly.
I have a terrible Uzo story from Athens, but I won't get into
Okay.
that.
So you see. I prefer a spirit which is similar but without anise, which is called Chipuro. I mean, it's still, I don't know, 45% alcohol or even more, I mean, but at least, the next morning you are fine. Yeah.
That's important, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
It's the same with port wine. Don't get drunk on port wine. My hometown is Porto, so don't
Yeah.
ever get. It's horrible.
Correct. Correct.
And you have a lot of people getting drunk, or it used to be. Now it's not totally for free because visiting the wine cellars was for free to drink 2 glasses. And you have a whole street full, like a whole part of the city. It's just wine cellar, so you can go from one to the next to the next. And in the wine cellar, it's cool, but then you get out of the wine cellar, and it's hot, and you don't feel
I guess you have to know how to control it. Eh? You have to be
good.
experienced. Yeah.
Yes, yeah. I mean, after showing everyone that visits my hometown, you get you get the experience. So I just okay. I think we can start. People will come in more because it's Saturday. But yeah. Welcome everyone to Science Society, and today we have a really wonderful guest speaker talking about his really interesting research. So thank you, Dr. Paschalis Gkoupidenis, for coming and for taking the time to talk with us today here. And let me give you a little bit of some background information. Dr. Pascali, he earned his PhD in material science from NCSR Demokritos, Athens, Greece, in 2014. And this PhD research focused on ionic transport mechanisms of organic electrolytes, physics of ionic based devices, and of non volatile memories. And after his PhD, he joined a group of George Maliaras at the Department of Bioelectronics, EMSE in France, as a postdoc researcher. And there he continued, or he focused on the design and development of organic neuromorphic devices based on electrochemical concepts. And in 2017, he joined the Max Planck Institute for Polymer Research, and he's currently the group leader at the Department of Molecular Electronics. Yeah, so thank you so much for coming. It's a great honor to have you here, and the stage is yours.
Thank
Quickly
you,
before we
Katerina,
do
for
that,
yep, yep.
there's a question we'd like to ask. What, if you're willing to indulge us, what was the first experience that made you know that you wanted to pursue science as a profession, or what was the path of your journey to your current point?
The first clear experience. So to be honest with you, I mean, in my bachelor's degree, I mean, I knew that I would like to do something with science, but I was not, really convinced that hardcore research would be something for me. And then, if I remember correctly, it was at some point during the end of my bachelor's degree where we had to take a project, and then basically this project was really important and really pivotal for me because it was I was really lucky to be involved in some microelectronic devices which were state of the art devices back then, industrial devices. And basically these devices were memory devices from ST Microelectronics, if I remember correctly. So in Europe is a leading technology in industrial level. And basically these were the really at the edge of technology around mid 2000 or something like this. And I really understood the importance of having really good devices and microelectronic devices, I mean. And then I understood what memory is in devices. And then at some point, I started to understand that microelectronics means, electronics. So we have electronic carriers of information. And then I understood that, biology, communication in biology happens in with different ways, with different means or different carriers. For example, not electrons and ions. And then I started, reading about neuroscience, biology, and then I went to another field, which is called of material science, which is called more or less ionic electronic mixed conductors, which means that these are materials which conduct not only electrons but ions. And then I started, going step by step to materials and devices which, as I will explain later on, which resemble more biological processes. And then I deviated a lot from classic electronics, and now I'm in a field of doing frontier research in devices which resemble more biological processes, and we are much closer now in neuroscience. And more or less that is a story.
Fascinating. Thank you for
Thank you.
sharing. And with that, we're ready for your presentation.
Yeah, so Let me start, let's say, more or less with some background information. So I will not. First of all, I mean, you can stop me whatever you want. So I want to have a casual, not a simple conversation with you. So you can stop me whatever you want. And so, as you all know, a popular approach, let's say, in artificial intelligence is the, let's say, representation of information processing aspects that are found in biological systems with artificial neural networks, the software neural networks that you all know that, and many of us we use. So this approach is based on executing algorithms on traditional computer architectures and traditional devices, microelectronic devices, as I mentioned before. And these now algorithms only loosely represent what happens in nervous systems. So it's only a loose representation of biological systems, because of course they are running on software and traditional microelectronic architectures. And as you all know, over the last, I would say, 10 or 15 years, this field of artificial intelligence has been developed really, quickly. We have an enormous potential there. And but however, there are many concepts of artificial intelligence are mainly based now on digital operating systems. So all these devices that we have in microelectronics, transistors, capacitors, no, but transistors mostly operate as digital devices. But on the other hand, we live in an analog world, and as you know better than me, many of you are neuroscientists, real neuroscientists. Uh, in biology, all these biological building blocks like neurons or synapses, they deal with a great diversity of signals. So we don't have, only electrons, but we have also other carriers of information in biology. For instance, ions, various ionic species, mostly alkaline species, neurotransmitters, biomolecules, and all these kind of things. So these are processes that you cannot directly emulate with classic electronics. And alternatively, now all these neural processing functions um, can be directly emulated with non-conventional technologies, microelectronic technologies, and circuits and architectures. By non-conventional, I mean any kind of technology that deviates from silicon technology. And we have many different, let's say, technologies there right now. Some of them are really fitted for specific applications. So, for example, for data intensive applications, and other approaches or other technologies and materials are mostly suited for interfacing with biological systems. So this is an example. As an example, I can say surely that organic devices fall into this category. So although this technology, this approach of artificial intelligence as we know it with software or machine learning was really successful and is really successful right now, there is ample of evidence that we have also to find new ways to emulate biological processes with technologies, meaning devices, microelectronic devices, circuits, or architectures. And for instance, you all know this example, this really impactful example that we had a few years ago. This supercomputer, which has been trained with more or less with deep neural networks. This AlphaGo computer from DeepMind, and this computer, as you know, won the world champion in this game Go back in 2015. I remember correctly, 16. But if you see, the metrics are quite different. So, for instance, the supercomputer consists of a massive amount of hardware parts. So, for instance, hundreds and thousands of CPUs and GPU boards. But on the other hand, the player the only thing that he wants is a plate of he needs a meal. It's so simple. And in terms of let's say numbers, what we know from this supercomputer that was running in the background was that it consumes a power of 20 kilowatts. So this is the number. And what we know roughly for a brain, for a human brain, is that it consumes more or less 20 or even less watts of power. On one hand, we have a supercomputer, that is trained only to execute specific computational tasks. So it was trained only to play this game Go or other various games, one-to-one games in other versions of this AlphaGo computer. But on the other hand, a nervous system is a general purpose intelligence system. So I believe that it's not really fair to right now to benchmark or to compare biological intelligence with this kind of supercomputer. And this is obvious why. So this is why we have to understand, uh, let's say, what are the basic or the most important computational primitives of biological systems. And we also have to understand how we can map those primitives with materials, microelectronic devices, circuits, or even systems. And another really interesting feature, at least for my research, is what we know, or the so-called Moravec's paradox. So Hans Moravec was and is a famous roboticist from CMU, from Carnegie Mellon. And what this paradox more or less says is that right now, it's easy to make computers to perform a sort of adult, let's say, like performance. So, for example, to execute hardcore computational tasks, to calculate equations and so on. But it's extremely difficult to give those the computer or a machine the ability of a 1-year-old to when it comes to perception, mobility, or the ability that we have to locomote in an open and unstructured environment. This is really a paradox. So, for example, what we know is that what the common belief, let me put it in this way, is that what we believe is that whatever is hard for computers should also be hard for humans. I mean, a task. But the reality is opposite in many cases. So, for example, a computer can really handle, many digit calculations, then can calculate many really huge numbers. For us, is more or less difficult to do it. But on the other hand, as I mentioned before, it's extremely difficult for a machine to give these capabilities to explore a really open and unstructured world, such as what happens with robotics, for example. This is really hard for a machine still. Many of those applications that you see on YouTube, they are really let's say, programmed, really, still now. And another aspect, which we go now a little bit more on my field, and it's closely related to biology, bioelectronics, and neuroscience, is that in order to have this seamless communication between electronics and biology, we have to develop from start electronics, devices, and circuits that share the common, let's say, computational primitives with biological systems. And why that? More or less, they have to speak the same language in order to have a really efficient communication between a technology and biology. And right now, what we have, roughly, with what you most of biologists and neuroscientists use in a lab, I mean, multi-electrode arrays and all these kind of things, more or less we have a capacitive communication between electronics and biology. But as I mentioned also before, we have a whole diversity of signals and signaling in biology. So, for example, ions, alkaline ions, neurotransmitters, and we have to find ways to develop materials and devices in order to take into account all these carriers of information. And this is really important. So we are talking now not about artificial intelligence, but hybrid intelligence with those kind of systems. And now going back to my research. So my research is focused on a specific category of materials and devices. We are mostly using in our lab organic materials and devices. And the difference between, let's say, those devices and the state of the art is that our devices are soft, materials are soft. They are polymers, basically. And if you have in mind what a polymer is like a soup is like pasta. Uh, it consists of long strings of macro, let's say, molecules, which are loosely packed between each other. And then, because of this reason, because of this softness, these materials allow, let's say, more efficient communication between biology and electronics when these materials are incorporated in a device. So, for instance, if you imagine a classic material like silicon, uh, if you take a piece of silicon and you leave it in air, then it oxidizes. It means that it creates, a really thin film of silicon dioxide, of glass basically, and this is an insulator. This means that if you immerse this material in a wet environment, in a wetware, this means that there will be an insulator between silicon and an electrolyte. But on the other hand, with soft matter, with soft materials, you have a direct communication between, ions, neurotransmitters, and the material that you have. And these are called mixed conductors, these materials, meaning that they don't have only the ability to conduct electrons, as you know in classic electronics, but they support also the transport of ions, neurotransmitters, and all these kind of things. Which means that right now we have the ability to have and we have devices, artificial devices, that can really, let's say, emulate really realistically what happens in biological systems. So, for example, we have artificial synapses that are really sensitive to neurotransmitters, real neurotransmitters, and this is really hard to do it with classic technologies. We have neurons, artificial neurons, for example, which exhibit spiking dynamics and all these kind of things. And they are really sensitive to what happens in a biological environment, to ionic concentrations under physiological and pathological ranges. And um, right now, the key property right now is that so far we had artificial devices and neuromorphic computing devices which were able to perform only hardcore computing and basically to perform, let's say, computation, neuromorphic computation in an accelerated time. But with those kind of, organic materials and devices, we have slow and dummy devices in a way, but all the time scales, the characteristic time scales, more or less the characteristic voltages, the carriers of information that are involved there, are really close to what happens in biology. And this is really important if in the future we want to create a technology which will be really efficiently communicating with biology. And this is really important, especially for closed loop, communication between electronics and biology, and for autonomous bioelectronic applications at the end. So this is more or less my research right now.
Wow, thank you so much for sharing.
Thank you,
Does
Dennis.
anyone on stage have questions? Because I definitely have one question in mind at least.
Super takes, because I was initially was going to say, okay, electronics solves all your life problems, but then I came in like 20 minutes later and it's still electronics. Like I'm like, you, like I have more than just electronic. I could I could make electronics work for me, you know, if I really try hard, like you do. Yeah, but what about the other things?
Maybe we get more to the questions of the research first, and then we can go to the more general questions like this. So thank you, Paschalis, for sharing. And
Thank you.
please, Dennis, Serena, Dr. Olu, go ahead with your questions, Dr. Shah.
Okay, I'll go first. So, in the translation of the digital to the organic realm, so I'm thinking of when I took music composition and we were trying to translate musical notes to the digital platform, and there was a phenomena called quantizing, where basically the machine can't really, and this might have changed, this was some time ago, the machine really couldn't accurately capture all the nuance of the organic expression. So I wonder if this was Has there been a change in that? And if not, how do you compensate for this translation differential?
Of course, Yuki. I mean, this is the obvious way to do it. I mean, as a first stage, as the basic communication. I mean, between an analog and a digital world. So you acquire signals, of course, and you digitize them, and this is really effective. I mean, this is really efficient. But if you want to avoid this, in a way, this conversion, then you have to perform as much as computation you can in the analog world. So if you want to avoid that, so for example, there are many applications that you want to obviously, when you convert those kind of signals into the digital world, you need additional electronics for many applications. So music was one example. For music and for this all kind of things, probably you don't care about computational resources because you do everything in a computer and you read and you play everything. I mean, in a computer, or in the best case, I mean, in I don't know, in a mobile phone or something like this. But there are many applications which you don't even have these resources. So, for example, point of care diagnostics or robotics, for example. So, if you want, for instance, to distribute intelligence in robotics or in material, as we call it, so inside materials, then there is no space for this conversion. And of course, if you have a centralized, unit to perform, this kind of conversion, it's easy. But if you want really to have many different cores around an intelligent agent or robotics or these kind of things, then you have to avoid these kind of things because they create a lot of delays. So there are specific reasons, and not for hardcore computing, but
Yeah,
mostly
like
for short computing.
AI people were
Memo,
rushing into
please
the
don't
future.
interrupt. Please don't interrupt the speaker when he's speaking. Thank you. Sorry, go
Yeah.
ahead.
So yeah, yeah. So of course this approach is and was really successful there, but especially in many applications of soft computing, it is beneficial to perform locally computation by avoiding this conversion between the analog and the digital world. And when we are talking uh, not about electrical signals but all the other kind of signals, obviously you want to perform everything there locally. When I'm talking about chemical signals and chemical signaling or ionic signaling, there are ways to perform computation not with electrons but with all the other carriers of information locally. So the problem with this conversion is that you lose a lot of information because everything becomes electrical after that. This is what I mean.
I understand. Thank you for your thank you for your answer.
Thank you, Dennis.
May I?
Serena,
Serena, go ahead.
So yeah, I'm going to have a lot of questions as we get into the material. But you did briefly mention you had an artificial neuron. I'm curious if you could say a few more words about that.
I mean, there are a few people that are working on the field. It's not. I don't I don't want to to take the lead on that. But there are right now small scale circuits which are neurons that um, they work with these principles that I've talked about right now. And one obvious example and obvious advantage of, again, in soft computing aspect, is that all these things can be really implemented into flexible or stretchable substrates. With organic electronics, there is a long history. For example, in terms of industry, I mean, with OLEDs, organic LEDs, so you can really implement all these things uh, in a large area. And large area integration, I mean that you can really integrate all these things in an area of 1 by 1 meter, or I don't know, half by half meter. This is really important because the whole microelectronic community goes down to dimensions and all these kind of things. But for many applications, so for example for environmental intelligence or for robotics, you don't need to scale down everything, or you don't need to have high performance electronics, but you have to distribute low performance electronics over space. In flexible substrates or in stretchable substrates in order to conform in the body or in a building or in any kind of other, I don't know, structure. And for these kind of things, organics, so to perform soft computation in, let's say, unconventional environments, organic electronics are really important.
May I ask a question, please?
Of course.
Thank you very much for your talk, Doctor. That's fascinating. One thing I was wondering, you were mentioning about like the soft materials that can work with the AIs and things like that. Does that mean that you can start to look at things like making strange things like faces that the computer could like emulate as in expressions and things like that? Would that mean if it could manipulate and pass through and communicate with through the materials, that it could actually interface with them to actually give things like that and actually look at stuff like expressions and all of the non-verbal things?
If I can you repeat it again, Jamie? Because
Oh,
I lost you a minute.
I beg your pardon. I'm saying the soft materials that you're
Yes.
saying that the the AIs and things can work through. Does this mean that that's for possible for things like faces, making like masks of human faces, and the AI could begin to learn to smile and to frown for like non-verbal communications, that sort of thing?
This can be, I mean, I've never thought it. I mean, but there is a whole area, I mean, in, in organic materials, which are called, I don't know, artificial noses. Um, because, I mean, there are, we call them artificial receptors in electronics, in organic electronics, but there is a whole, library of materials that they have specific, let's say, interaction with biomolecules. And this is something that you cannot do with classic electronics because, biology is closer to chemistry. So, for example, if you go to a chemist, you can, I mean, a really good chemist, you can more or less order a material that uh, will have a specific interaction with a specific ion or a specific neurotransmitter, or it can be selective to a specific ion and not the other ions. These are, and because, soft matter and soft materials and polymers are closer to biology. Uh, so you can really start building, at least in the future, smart systems that are, selective to specific, odors or, I don't know, specific neurotransmitters, to have specific interactions with biomolecules in a liquid phase or even in the gas phase, as you said. The possibilities are infinite with polymers and with organics because we are not limited to a specific library of materials, but the possibility of having materials with a wide range of properties is almost infinite. But on the other hand, every time that we as a community introduce a new material, we have, of course, many problems, of course. So we have for example, study the stability of a new polymer. We have to integrate this polymer or this material in a real microelectronic device. So it's not straightforward whenever you add a material. But I guess, again, the freedom that you have to create a material with a specific interaction with a biological carrier, it's almost, we have infinite possibilities through
That's
synthesis.
That's fascinating. Thank you. And one more thing. What then, given that these possibilities, I'm sorry, I can't really get my mind around the kind of possibilities that are available with something like that. So can you tell me maybe like one or two really big obvious things? Like you mentioned the environment, or you mentioned medical. Is this the kind of thing that you could make like a model of a human body and put the polymers and whatnot, the soft materials to emulate, like I don't know, blood flows or things like that, so that this thing could say emulate you know, the body so that people can like observe it? Is that the kind of thing that could be done, or any other like
So I would
different?
say that so simulating a really large scale system, I think it's really a far-fetching approach, and even really established technologies have failed on that. I mean, even silicon technology. So at least in Europe, and I think also in the US, we had really huge, large-scale programs, scientific programs of millions of neurons, and basically they failed to emulate in a large scale a brain. Uh, but I think, I mean, there is a lot of space, I mean, in small scale circuits anyway. So I don't believe that right now we have a technology to scale up in order to emulate, large systems. But it's really important because we have many degrees of freedom to emulate biological functions in a really limited, a really small, amount of neurons, for example, or cells. And this is really important because this means that at the end you have a system, a well-defined system that you can really study. So really emulating, large systems it's really not possible yet with any kind of technology, I would say.
Okay. Like too many variables involved with that, right?
Yeah,
But you're
yeah, yeah.
saying
If,
that
if you are
breaking it.
talking about if we are talking about the whole organ, no. Or for example, in microfluidics, I mean, you have, these organoids, which you simulate the function of an organ, but these are in small scale. But all these
Right,
platforms are really important.
right.
Yeah.
That's fascinating. Okay. And the neuron, the neuron simulation that it has, is that like just simulating, say, two or three neurons and simulating how they would interact, something like that?
But at least what someone can do in a really cheap lab in a way with limited resources, at least you can do those things. But as I mentioned before, organic electronics is a community which in certain aspects it's really mature. So in many of you have in your mobile phones you have OLEDs, organic LEDs, light emitting diodes, which means that if there is an opportunity for commercialization, organic electronic, I mean the technologies that the community has, um, the community, let's say, has the capabilities to upscale something in a really industrial level. And then a successful example is, as I mentioned before, OLEDs, organic LEDs. So right now, what we do is limited in a few, let's say, elements. But of course, I mean, if there is a reason, of course, there are capabilities to extrapolate this into hundreds or thousands of elements of devices. I mean, industry can do that, or industrial partners, let's say.
Incredible. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Hi, I had a question, just maybe a more basic one since I came into the room late, but would it be possible for us to pin a reference from your work, Dr. Paschalis? Because I just wanted to get more of a sense of the background of what you were talking about earlier, or if you have a recommended review.
Yeah, I mean, we had a recent review. So this was, I mean, this describes the whole area, let's say, of organic neuromorphic electronics and mostly with materials that are more suitable for biological applications. So it's a general review, but it's a bit focused. So this was a review paper in Applied Physics Reviews 2020. Applied Physics Reviews 2020. The first author is hyphen Link.
Thank you.
So this is something that I can really recommend to get an overview.
Yeah, this is really exciting. I also
Eric, you're a little bit far away from the microphone. I think we can. I cannot hear you. Maybe others can.
hello.
Me too.
He dropped. He'll be back shortly. Oh, there you
Yeah.
go. No, still coming in low.
So what I find interesting is that you kind of can replicate really well the synchronicity and oscillations of a network, and that kind of the output reflects kind of very relatively similar to what we see in actual brain stimulation. And you also mentioned that you can basically reflect um, something like neuroplasticity. Would you like to explain maybe that aspect a little bit more to the audience? I think that's a very interesting one.
Yeah, of course, Katarina. This is a really interesting question. So, because I didn't have time to mention that. So, the I mean, I described it a little bit, I mean, at the beginning, but it wasn't clear enough. So, the advantage that those materials or these devices have is that they operate in electrolytes. And when I mean operate in electrolytes, these can be solid electrolytes that you have in solid state batteries, for example, that you have in your mobile phones. You all have lithium batteries. More or less, we have devices that operate, the community has devices that operate as those kind of batteries, solid state. But on the other hand, those kind of technological devices, artificial devices, can also operate in liquid electrolytes, in salty electrolytes that we have in the brain also. And this is really important. I mean, if you want to emulate some high order phenomena that you find in the brain. So first, I mean, we introduced some of those things back in 2015, 16, I think, and the community was not really positive about this, especially community, coming from traditional microelectronics, because basically what we were proposing is the operation of electronics in liquids. And this is really weird for people coming from traditional technologies. But here is what happens. I mean, if you develop a technology which operates in liquids, in salty electrolytes, basically, what basically you can do is that, for instance, you have many devices which perform computation, and all these devices share a common or a global electrolyte, salty electrolyte, which means that whatever happens in the electrolyte can really change the properties, the electrical or the electrochemical, I would say, properties of all these devices globally. If you, for example, if you increase or decrease the concentration of ions, if you have a small deviation over a physiological range of ions, ionic species there of concentrations, then you really change the let's say the response of those devices. If you change a few degrees the temperature, or if you introduce small amounts of neurotransmitters there in the global medium, this is a global medium, this is the key, then suddenly you change the properties of all these devices. For you, for many of you that you are biologists and neuroscientists, this means that we have a platform to emulate homeostasis, biological homeostasis. Another important factor, for example, when you have global electrolytes, is that the devices that we have that share a global electrolyte communicate between each other through this global electrolyte, which means that if you have, for instance, an electrochemical oscillation from somewhere, from the electrolyte that is applied, that is forced on the electrolyte, then suddenly all these devices can, let's say, are connected, are functionally connected through this global oscillation, and then their response can be synchronized, or we have, as we call it, phase locking between these global oscillations and what happens in a single device level. This is more or less what we have in LFPs, in local field potentials, in the brain, for example. So my point is that by having a global electrolyte, even an aqueous electrolyte, that is shared to many of those devices that perform local computation, means that we have a medium, this electrolyte, that serves as a connectivity medium or homeostasis medium, or a medium for synchronizing devices. And these are high order phenomena that you cannot easily replicate them with other technologies. So they have to be sensitive, let's say, to ions, neurotransmitters, and all these kind of things. And the second part of your question, if I remember correctly, Katarina, was about plasticity. So imagine that more or less those devices are working as batteries in the simplest approach. So, for instance, we can really put or inject ions, alkaline ions, uh, for example, potassium, sodium, chloride, and other ions in the material, and then the material, the electrical properties of the material change in an analog way, which means that we have right now artificial synapses, so devices that they have these, they serve as let's say a building block for connecting neurons in an analog way. So we have this synaptic plasticity in those devices, but this synaptic plasticity, um, it's not an electrical synaptic plasticity, but depends on ions, neurotransmitters, and all these kind of things, which means that we have devices that can really interact with what happens in biological substrates.
Yeah, I think that is a very important part of these devices. I don't think, I mean, we have, neural networks that can through reinforcement learning,
Of course.
kind of, but it's not a physical. It's so, we had guest speaker Miguel Nicolelis and Ronald Zuccarello here. I'm not sure if you
Yep.
know.
Yeah, you know him.
They always say, or they wrote the book together, The Relativistic Brain, and basically one of the big problems is that you cannot, like in the current state of regular AI or neural networks, you don't have a physical change in the material that kind of reflects the memory that is built. And I think that's the big difference of your devices and the current usually used devices, which could maybe just to have that physical difference. Do you think that will make a big change in AI?
Yeah. I think it will make a really big change in AI because, as I mentioned, I mean, AI now is based on devices which have electronic properties, only electronic properties. But as you all know, I mean, you have a whole diversity of signals, and every carrier plays a specific role on signaling, which means that if, for example, in the future we build artificial network, I will not call them networks, but if we let's say if we build physical networks that are sensitive to all these carriers of information, we might be able in the future to capture biological processes more precisely. This is a really important aspect, of course. And there are also many aspects. So, for example, when we are talking about the technology, right now the capabilities, for example, of traditional technologies in upscaling, to integrate the number of devices are enormous. So right now, silicon can really integrate, millions and billions of devices into a single substrate. The difficult thing is how you connect them. So you know better than me that we have a whole diversity of connecting topologies in biology. We have local topologies, global topologies, really regular topologies, three-dimensional connectivity, and it's really difficult to. So this is the limiting factor right now. It's really difficult to find a technological way right now to emulate this connectivity. It's impossible to do it with technology. This
Yes,
parallel connectivity.
and another big problem that we currently have in the field is just the scaling up of the computation, like of biological systems. We are way more efficient, with a little bit of food we do all this
Yeah,
computation. So
I agree.
will your devices also be like innovate that efficiency aspect?
in principle, some of those devices, and this is the race right now. I mean, in principle, one of those aspects, because right now, I mean, for the moment, I just described only, qualitative properties, but of course, we should have also metrics, real metrics for that. So, for instance, having devices that operate at the millivolt range, so 1 or 2 or 3 millivolts, which are close to what happens in biology, is really important in terms of power consumption. So right now, for example, because all these devices are working liquids with ions, that the energy that you want to transport some ions inside water is really low. uh, the operation voltages basically, or the differences that we need to apply in voltages, are in this range, so 5, 10, 20 millivolts, and this is closer to what happens in biology, meaning that if we in the future we integrate many of those devices, this means that overall this circuit or this system will consume less energy and less power, and this is really important. As I
Yeah.
mentioned at the beginning, 20 kilowatts and 20 watts is the difference, more or less, between, a supercomputer and the brain. So the difference is enormous still.
Well, I'm really enamored with your approach of using physical and chemical systems to make novel devices and computations. And I'm curious about the paper that's pinned to the top of the room, where you describe long-range interactions between macromolecules on the order of 100 nanometers or so. I'd be interested to hear a little bit more about those systems, because they seem like an interesting avenue into these novel devices.
So Serena, to get it, in order to get it right. So the question is to comment on devices that. So I didn't get the question. I mean,
So
sorry.
there's a paper linked to the top of the room that describes your experimental results with long distance electrodynamics interactions with macromolecules on the order of 100 nanometers or so.
So this is I'm not aware basically of this paper, to be honest with you, but
Oh, is that not your work?
no, because not not yet at least.
It was the
Okay.
work from the other person in the room before. That's what that was.
Oh,
That's what that is. Yeah,
But
that was
it looks like a
plentiful.
nice, an
Yeah,
interesting one. I will read it.
yeah.
okay.
That was from another doctor from before.
Which
That's
paper?
Yeah, yes. You remember when we were in that other room a minute ago, Katerina, with
Oh, but
the doctor from
okay,
Florence?
the,
The electromagnetic stuff is still up there.
no. Oh, I'm so sorry.
I
Yeah,
I got confused. I'm
I,
sorry.
Oh my
yeah.
God, I'm really
I thought
so
you
sorry.
noticed it. I
But
thought I was noticing. I was going,
Please,
oh,
next
okay.
time. I linked
but
the.
it's an interesting one.
Yeah, I'm so
Yeah.
that's our guest speaker. That is soon coming, Dr. Marco Pettini. But I'm
Okay,
so
okay,
sorry.
I was ready
okay.
to
Well,
ask my question.
let me ask a
Please
different
go
question. So on the you described artificial synapses as responsive to different types of ions. Part of the efficiency of the synapse is there's active removal of the neurotransmitters, after signaling. I'm wondering if there's been, or how reversible that signal is. If there's an influx of ions into the material, is there a corresponding system for active removal and restoration back to its unsignaled state?
Uh, so uh, in terms of ions, so devices that are responsive to ions, is all these processes are really reversible. So really, chemistry now has all these tools to have artificial synapses which are sensitive to a specific ion. We have a analog memory phenomena, meaning that we can really tune the electrical properties of an artificial synapse in an analog way, like what happens in real biological synapses. And of course, this is reversible. So by applying, for example, the opposite potential, then you can really restore the initial state of the device. With chemistry, This is a little bit trickier. So, for example, instead of ions, if you use neurotransmitters, for example, you have to use other molecules which interact with the neurotransmitters in order to erase a memory, but you have to erase this memory chemically, not electrically. So, not by applying a chemical, an electrical potential, but you have to introduce other chemical species. So there are ways and there are many tricks, with that. And basically, as I mentioned at the beginning, the possibilities are infinite. With ions, the process is reversible. With macromolecules and ionic molecules, there are ways to do it, but not electrically, chemically mostly.
Actually, there was a paper recently, and I've pinned it over here to the side. So neurons or fickle electric fields are more reliable for information. It was a recent paper, I've sent it in the back channel as well, that showed that the fields on the surface help to reinforce information coherence. So kind of like an orchestra, you have the conductor playing. Basically playing the orchestra, and each musician can be interchanged. So that's why, for example, the hypothesis in the paper is that that's part of the reason why the brain is so robust in information processing, because there's this strange kind of coupling with the field and the electromechanical functions of the cells as well. So uh, perhaps you're familiar with it, perhaps not, but I was curious what you thought of that.
So this was, if I remember correctly, this was a paper in Brain or something like this. So it had a really nice artwork, if I remember correctly, right?
Please forgive me if I'm totally misunderstanding something, but if you can use chemicals and electrolytes and things in this way, does that mean you mentioned before the slightest change in like voltage or something can actually have a different effect on the technology, yeah, the calculations and stuff like that? Did you said that, yeah?
More or less, yes. Yeah.
Yeah. Does that mean then that if you had like essentially like a little chemical brain, does that allow for like much more robust sort of creative problem solving for something rather than a very, very complex, like all obviously in the computer you have to have formulas and conditions and everything, whereas this could allow for a lot more like here's a problem here, and it can actually solve it in a different way or think or process it in a different way each time you put the same problem in.
Look, this is a really important and interesting question, Jamie. So, and this goes back to my biomimicry. So when I say biomimicry, I mean biomimicry in general. So when the first airplane from Wright brothers was introduced, so the main question was, do you really need wings that flapping back and forth, to have an airplane? So the question that we always have, all these people, all these communities that they are working biomimicry, is that up to which extent you have to emulate biology to be efficient. And of course, right now, the only answer that we have is that, of course, right now, it's what we have is not enough, at least. So your question is really nice and important. And I'm not sure if you really need, those aspects of biological aspects if you want to create an isolated system which performs computation, just to solve mathematics or whatever. Really hardcore computation. But for instance, if you need a system which performs computation but close to biology, it means that you need those kind of freedoms, those degrees of freedom. So you you have to be able to be sensitive and responsive to all these carriers of information. Because in a way it's like converting. So not I'm not talking about an analog to digital conversion, but you have all these kind of conversions between chemical signals, ionic signals, or the opposite, or chemical to chemical, chemical to ionic, ionic to chemical. You have all this conversion locally there with the technology. Meaning, for example, to detect a disease, for example, or to detect a precursor of a disease, you have to develop technologies that are sensitive not only to electronics, to electrical signals. So I don't believe, I mean, you know better than me, but I don't believe that the main expression of epilepsy is just high frequency oscillations. There are also other precursors there. This is just an example, I mean, and and this is an example
Mhm.
to show why we need, I mean, electronics that are able to handle all these signals bidirectionally
Yeah,
in both ways.
I immediately see applications for immune systems and just tracking of that kind of information because, our team does. Uh, we've
I
adapted a
agree.
technology that allows non-invasive glucose monitoring, and we've seen this kind of phase lock phenomena of the molecules, and it suggests that you can map out basically a lot of immune activity and then get a profile of what's actually happening there. And in a way, that's a sort of computation, but in the sense that it's a computation that you can observe and you can say what the system is doing by its activity. So it's a very fascinating thing. If I may ask, what kind of sensor technology did you use to make these sorts of detections? Like our team uses just a simple coupled split ring resonator type system. So I'd be curious what kind of hardware you got.
No, no, it's not about. I mean, what we are doing, I mean, in our lab is that we develop new materials and devices for that. So we don't use commercial devices. So what I can fairly say is that we start from scratch to develop materials that are sensitive to specific properties of biological substrates. And then we really fabricate from scratch capacitors, transistors, small scale circuits, artificial neurons, artificial synapses that do specific things. So I don't have a specific answer for that, but we start from zero to fabricate devices. So this is our expertise more or less in my lab.
Yeah. We're more designing the kind of circuit or the meta material just to get like a
Yeah.
better increase in sensitivity, but we don't actually go to the material science. So
Yeah.
could you comment perhaps on the material science? I apologize if it was already stated. So
No, no, I
it,
didn't spend a lot of time, to be honest with you, on that. So uh, to put it in a framework, basically, we mostly use materials which are called organic mixed conductors, which the main, I mean, they have a palette of properties, but the main properties of those materials, and these materials, of course, are a part of a device, but the core property of those materials is that they conduct not only electrons, but also ions. They can support the transport um, of molecular ions, of neurotransmitters deep into their volume, and uh, they can perform this translation or this transduction between an ionic signal and an electronic signal. Mixed conductor means that, I mean, I don't want to go into the details in chemistry, but what happens is that whenever there are ions in this polymer, these ions can change the electronic conductivity of this polymer, which means that those materials and devices, they perform an ion to electron converter and conversion process, which means that those devices, they are, let's say, a bridge between the analog ionic world that you have in biology and the electronics, which more or less they accept electrons. So they perform this kind of conversions, and this conversion is local, so it happens in situ on a biological environment
that's
because of
okay.
chemistry.
So that seems to
Because of
be what's
chemistry.
missing, for example, with Neuralink, because they seem to have only captured one of the components. If I may ask a further follow-up question, what is the, I guess, industrial potential here? Because for us, it's all about keeping it very, very cheap. And perhaps this is not appropriate to ask, so please feel free to dismiss the question. But what is the cost of manufacturing these kinds of platforms right now?
I I'm not sure, to be honest with you, that I'm not able to comment on that. So it really depends on the process that you have on lab. So for us, because cost is not really critical, and precision is really critical. We tend to use really precise, let's say, processes to have devices which are 100% reproducible. So for us, because we are a lab, I mean, cost for us doesn't really matter. But when there is an idea, and we have to translate this idea in an industrial level, then we go into this kind of discussions. And then there are possibilities to decrease the cost. So, for instance, as I briefly mentioned, I mean, at the beginning, all this organic electronics, the nice with organic electronics is that they are uh, they can be really implemented with additive manufacturing methods, as we call them. So you can really print them with 3D printing, inject printing, in large scales with something that is called screen printing. So these are massive techniques, and basically the only thing that you need is a nozzle to to just print on a flexible substrate. And these techniques, I mean, because this is a parallel and massive technique, in principle it's much easier and much less expensive than what we do in our lab. So the short answer is that in our lab we choose, because there are many reasons, to use expensive techniques, but in principle all this can be translated to a massive and really cheap techniques.
Yeah, that's kind of I guess
Yeah,
the path that we had was the prototype was a few $1,000s, and now it's
yeah,
tens of
the
dollars
prototype.
because we
Yeah,
were able to
yeah,
piggyback off of
yeah,
the
yeah,
silicon industry and other
yeah,
technologies that exist out there. So it was
yeah.
quite interesting being able to do that. Do you see that as a possibility, or uh,
Yeah, yeah, up to an extent, yeah. So if I may comment, I mean, on the previous, discussion part, the limiting factor, which is not necessarily, negative in many cases, that uh, the cost in many cases is when you develop new materials. So to find ways to synthesize new polymers and new materials can be really costly, and to find ways to upscale, you can synthesize a really nice material and polymer that has incredible properties, and you might have only a few grams of a few milligrams. And then there is a whole story of how you upscale those kind of things, to create kilograms of these polymers. And I think the cost is there. So the cost is mostly, on the side of chemistry, to be honest with you, because all the other processes are more or less established.
yeah,
So
yeah,
microfabrication processes are established. I mean, it's not a problem. So how you develop materials that are in let's say less expensive side is
And
critical.
was your search criteria or your search process for these materials, was it computational or analytical?
Uh, Depends on what you want to do, basically. So what we do as a methodology mostly is that this is by rule. I mean, in in the lab, I mean, because it's most the fastest and the most efficient ways that many of those materials are commercially available, to be honest with you. So when we start a study, we tend to prefer commercially available materials in order to extract our initial conclusions. And then after that, once we have the conclusions, then we start, talking with chemists to have a specific function. Then on this discussion, some theoreticians might be involved, as you said, which perform computation. This can be with AI to to explore really the infinite space that we have in properties, or it can really be simulations, or by with first order first principle simulations, I mean, to just see what kind of properties we need, and then they synthesize new materials. But the path is it's almost always from commercial materials to more specific and tailor-made materials. This is the
Yeah,
way we do it usually.
yeah, because like our team, for example, was able to do some analytical work up to a point, and then the explosion of complexity forced us to then embrace some of these computational methods just because of the size
Yeah, yeah,
of the
yeah,
space.
yeah.
So I was just curious, like, what your methodology was, because I started off my academic career being in more of an analytical kind of scientist, and then now I'm kind of seeing myself doing more and more computational things. There's still that human intuition element guiding the vision, but
It's really important.
yeah,
Yeah.
but the really interesting results are computational. It seems more and more. Although there was a recent speaker here, I forget the speaker's name, but they had an amazing result, just purely analytical with chemistry, which just blew my mind because I don't hear that often nowadays. So that's why I asked the question. Thank you.
Thank
Dr.
you. Thank you. So,
Mackenzie,
yep. Please.
was it the talk on Wednesday, Eric? Dr. Lewis Mackenzie?
It was, I believe it was the female scientist. I hate to say it even that way, but she spoke with a German accent, maybe, or some sort of accent, and she talked about the idea of choosing a molecule through first principles, and then going on from there. So.
Yeah, it was a
He was actually also Greek. It's about the pathogens, the microbe resistant
yeah, the antibiotic
to
resistance. She
breaking.
had a novel breakthrough that was.
Yeah, to breaking.
Mhm.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, I was also
And
curious about the if you've looked at ways in terms of isolating and compartmentalizing some of these systems. So whether they have ion selective membranes or combined fields and hybrid approaches, whether you can or have looked at constructing arrays of them. So the particular history of the ionic composition or in the fields of any particular cell, not biological, but just as a region of space that's somewhat insulated, can carry that history as a part of the computation. Is that making sense? I mean, in terms of arrays of these that can hold state and time history.
Oh, that's an interesting. I'm also curious about that. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, so let me put it this way. So if you want, if so, the community 10 years ago or even earlier, so the main task of the community was to build devices and circuit for logic applications. Logic applications means more or less classic electronics as you know them. And the critical part of classic electronics is that they have to be stable over time. So if a circuit operates in the same way, in a way today, it has to operate in this exactly the same way some months after that. But what you say is exactly what happens in biology. So if we flip a little bit, I mean, the properties that some materials of those have, which are not, for sure, are not good for logic circuits, is that they have this ability to integrate over time, for example, ionic signals. So they change. So what they called, I mean, in the community, they called that, um, a shift in or a drift. I mean, in the behavior of the device. But actually, this drift is really predictable. And by taking advantage of those kind of drifts or the integration of ionic signals over time, then you have devices which evolve over time. I mean, in
Well,
the
in the
long
sense
scale.
that it's a kind of analog computing, in the sense that
Yeah, 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 yeah.
it would be a primary
And this,
feature of the device,
yeah,
that you're designing, and it seems
and
certainly with additive manufacturing and other types of technologies, you could fabricate larger arrays of these things that could have analogy to hidden layers or this kind of thing, but would be physical and in real time responsive. And you could couple in light information, ionic information, field information, but it would be in essence an analog computational device.
I have sort of a different question about whether these systems that you've built can be used to model um, specific diseases, especially like ion channel diseases, as you were talking about. I think some of the composition of these materials that you could probably model ion channel disorders that lead to things like epilepsy or migraine or ataxia, and then see how those play out in your models, and then maybe even test possible drugs or interventions to affect the progression of the disease through this. Is there work in that area being done?
Is that like the
Absolutely.
organic little circuits? Sorry, just to clarify, is that like, where they say, oh, this is like an organ, this is like a lung, and you can see those kind of,
Yeah.
is that what you mean, Dr. Olu?
Yeah, so the idea is that once you've built this system that's a model of some specific ion channel based disease, then you can test different compounds to see if it then affects the progression of the disease or modifies the progression of the disease.
In a really well controllable environment. This is absolutely correct. So, for instance, so the community uses this term, neural accelerator in classic, artificial neural networks. But if we extend this term, for sure we can have in the future disease accelerators, for example, by having these circuits. So you're absolutely correct. Yeah, and for me, it's a really fascinating field of research.
Yeah, I think that's a big problem, at least for the models that I've worked with, the leaky integrated firing models. They kind of always seem to be missing some sort of channel of communication. I remember one of the first conversations I had with Katerina was, where is the information stored that we're thinking about in the brain? Because, okay, there's the synapses, but that doesn't seem to be adequate. And then there's all these layers of complexity, and at every scale there is some sort of memory-like function, and this process seems to integrate into a common, oh, here's my thought. And not to speculate too much, but can you, perhaps you've thought of this, but the idea of the nature of qualia, the nature of the experience, do you think this would help us understand that a little bit more? Or do you see I think the question perhaps is clear, even though perhaps not.
For me, the question remains a question, but it's a really fascinating question. I mean, I don't know if all these things, come up by small, systems and by compartmentalization of a system, or you really need large scale systems. But for me, it's a really fascinating aspect. So
Okay, yeah.
I cannot answer on this
Yeah,
directly,
yeah.
to be honest.
Yeah, I was just curious because it seems that we're slowly building up more and more of the channels that represent the encoded information, and then being able to decode it, we get that much closer to the subjective quality of experience of conscious thought, or that sort of thing.
I have another question. So this is incredibly involved, but where do you personally hope to see this research going, or where you'd like to channel your efforts into it? Do you have in your head a kind of roadmap where you're thinking, I think it would be best applicated here, or I'm curious if this could be done, or anything like that? Do you have a specific direction you'd like to go to with the research?
If there was industrial people listening, they're like, hey, what should we do?
I mean, there are always ways to answer to these questions, but I prefer to, for the moment, I prefer to keep those in a basic research level, let's say. So, for instance, the short term roadmap would be to have small scale devices and circuits that would be able to efficiently interact with biological substrates. And then I believe that if we have metrics which are competitive or quite different than what we have commercially available right now, I believe that there will be a way for extrapolating those things. So for me, it's really important to build a solid background of these kind of things right now. And this is the scope of, at least at the institute that I'm working. So they perform basic research, Max Planck Society. So I think it's really important. To build a solid foundation on these kind of things right now, and applications will come. I'm sure about this.
Okay, maybe the question, if it was rephrased, where would you see this work potentially being in 7
No,
5?
no, no. Actually, that was my question, because I was asking where did he, like, himself, like, and you answered me, doctor, by saying you believe that the topic just needs the thorough research that it deserves. Yes,
Yeah.
and that's where you're looking at the moment, just to thoroughly understand it better. And
Yeah. So
yeah,
to develop, let's say, if you want to put it in a short phrase or in a couple of sentences, is to develop low power electronics, organic electronics, which have enhanced abilities to communicate with biological substrates, and then in this way we will have platforms in order to have bidirectional communication with biology.
Fascinating.
So,
Thank you very much.
That's
you're welcome.
amazing. I wonder if, of course, this would probably interest the folks over at Neuralink, because that's immediately what I think of, but perhaps that's incorrect, but very exciting.
Thank you.
Yeah, I wanted to check in with you about your time availability, if you still have a few minutes, or because we've been going for an hour and 20 minutes, and I apologize again about
No worries, no worries. I mean, it's my pleasure. It's my pleasure.
yeah, I apologize again for posting the wrong paper. It was somehow must been in my copy paste
No
thing
worries.
previous one. So
Thanks, Bill
next
Gates.
time correct me, guys.
But the paper was nice.
Yeah, he will be coming. I can check. Dr. Marco Bettini from Italy. He will be coming later this month. So yeah. So everyone, please follow the Science Society. How you do that is on the top where it's written Science Society. There's this little greenhouse. If you click on it, you will see the dates, like the rooms that we will have, and some short information. And you can join the club. And then if you click on this little bell, it will give you if you want to be reminded about some room that we will have. You will be reminded if you click on the little bell. And yeah, so
I think we have one more person who came up last minute. The red eye, so to speak, Andrew Cuttafin, a friend of mine. So I hope the question is amazing, as your questions are always interesting, Andrew.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to ask Dr. Paschalis a question. Kalispera, Dr. Paschalis. I do not
Kalispera.
speak. I do not speak Greek, but I just thought you'll feel homely with a good evening greeting in Greek. I'm wondering. I feel so bad for missing the conversation, but thankfully the replays are on, so I'll definitely have a listen and read the paper as well. I'm wondering if you can speak a bit on Brian Johnson's project named Kernel. Kernel spelled with a K. It's a non-invasive brain-computer interface. It basically kind of predicts, let's say, brain waves, trying to differentiate between what could be circumstantial or what is actually neurochemical. So, for example, practical utilities could be, let's say, in the ER, in the accident and emergency, where someone shows up with, let's say, acute symptoms of depression or even suicidal thoughts. And then it could be differentiated whether or not it is the neurochemistry at fault or just something circumstantial in terms of the mind.
No, I'm not. So this is a really nice comment. I mean, so I'm not really aware, deeply aware. I mean, of this research, but I think it's, it's really important to have these technologies, optical technologies, for these kind of things. There are obvious advantages of having a communication, an optical communication with the brain. To be honest with you, I mean, and to really comment on that really deeply, I don't. I mean, I have to study more on that.
I
But
could try and
it's
send you some. I
yeah,
can try and send you some.
yeah,
Or to Katerina, and Katerina will get in touch with you.
yeah, yeah.
And if I may, just if there are students listening in the audience, and this is kind of an important thing for academia, as we have these generations of students, if there were students listening at the undergrad level or the graduate level, what would you recommend as a place where they could get started on this work? Obviously, going to your page, but if there's any specific resources or anything like that that you would recommend, or a talk I think folks would really appreciate that.
So what I can do is I can post a few review papers, but I think the best way is to start with a few review papers which summarize more or less the state of the art and the advancements and the key properties of those kind of materials. And as you know, a general advice would be that someone who wants to be successful on that has to be on the interface, you know, between electronics and biology, has to be super you know, interested in what happens in biology. Although if even me, I mean, I don't have a background in biology and neuroscience, but it's really important to live on this interface for me. But I can share, if you want, a few review papers on that, and perspective papers. We
Yes.
also have a few interesting perspectives on that.
I'll
Dr.
make sure.
Paschalis, I have another quick follow-up question. This is a bit
Of
more
course.
entertaining for everyone,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
including yourself.
yeah.
Are you connected with your, let's say, fellow countryman Manolis Kellis?
Manolis who?
Manolis Kellis.
I don't know him.
MIT
Manolis.
researcher, yeah.
No, I don't know him personally. Yeah.
I hope
No.
somehow you get connected with him.
Yeah, I can.
I'll try to send you some.
Yeah, the two of them should definitely connect. Yeah.
Okay, good to know that. Thank you.
I'll back
Maybe we
channel the
might,
name.
maybe we can. I can try to invite him and then let you know. Maybe we can do that. Andrew,
Yeah,
if you send me a link,
yeah,
then
that would be great.
I'll do that. That's actually the plan for the next round, maybe later this year. We were planning on, because we had some guest speakers that have like overlap of interests and sometimes know each other, sometimes don't, but it's interesting. So we were planning on doing rooms like this in the future where we have maybe more kind of a panel discussing a topic. I think that would be interesting for everyone, or where maybe, yeah, maybe they're
That could be incredibly
Yeah.
interesting.
Count me in. Yeah, of course.
Yeah, this
I
is.
sent you both the link to Manolis Kellis Wikipedia, Katerina and Dr.
Yeah, he
Paschalis.
also did a feature on Lex Friedman. So if you're curious about doing that, I'm sure the cool kids hanging out with the cool kids will get you on Lex Friedman. So I think reaching out to the public and doing public outreach with even like super cutting edge theoretical science, I think is really useful. I recall going to a talk in high school in grade 12. I drove almost 2 hours to go see Edward Witten, and it made such an impression that I studied very, very hard for a very long time. So I think it's always exciting to do that sort of thing. But thank you very much for joining us today. I think Clubhouse is a wonderful place to meet all these like-minded people, and Katerina, the founder of the club, is doing such a great job. I don't know when you sleep, Katerina, so you'll have to tell us the secret in another life or something.
Well, this night I really didn't. I don't know until when did the room yesterday go, Dennis. I think I fell asleep at like 1:30 a.m. I'm not sure.
Try to look forward the morning your time.
No, it's fine. I just fell asleep at some point, and
Yeah.
then I'm also sick on top, so I'm not very good today. I really apologize. So
Dr. Paschalis, for people that joined the room, like myself, a bit more late, maybe if with Katerina's permission, if we're heading towards the end of the room, maybe a retrospect of what has been discussed, a bit of a boiling down.
The boiling down of my research, you mean, eh? Or in general?
yeah,
Yeah,
so
distill years into seconds, please. Go
yeah,
for
the lingo
it.
house is reset the room. That's what people
Yeah.
say. A 1 minute.
So
Sorry.
the first conclusion of the discussion before 7 p.m. my time, I mean, was that you don't drink ouzo, you don't drink something with anise.
And
So this was the first
don't drink
conclusion,
porcelain
if you remember.
too much in the wine.
So this was the first one.
And just to let people know, I tweeted out to Manolis Kellis on Twitter. I had the good fortune
Thank you.
to follow him, and he followed me back because of some interesting thing that I wanted to talk to him about. He's a very
Yes.
wonderful speaker, very soft spoken, speaks like a Jedi. And one of my favorite stories that he told was when I think his child's bicycle was stolen, and the child was very upset. And he said, "Look, we're lucky enough to be well off enough that we could afford to have a bicycle stolen. But those who stole the bicycle, imagine how their life is. It must be that much more difficult." And it created this level of compassion. And I've used that line myself when people have had their items stolen, and it creates a certain level of comfort and compassion. So not only is he a wonderful scientist as yourself, but the level of compassion that I think sometimes scientists demonstrate is a good thing for society, especially
Oh yeah.
nowadays when everything seems very chaotic.
That's a
Thank you,
really good
Dennis.
share, Io. Also, that's a very fortunate glitch in the matrix that you guys follow each other, yourself and Malonis Gillis. Also, a quick share. I also had my bike stolen when I was a young boy, and I never understood until I grew up later. My mom said they needed it more. I just couldn't comprehend that at the time.
I was just going to say thank you, Dennis. That means I won't feel bad when I steal your bike.
Oh, and I'm so happy. I just got a delivery of a bunch of electronic components. So today I'll be doing some lab work here, soldering things together and doing some stuff. So yay for science.
Okay, so yeah,
Here, here.
thank you so much everyone for coming, and especially to Paschalis. Thank you so much. It was a great pleasure. Such a
Thank you
great
very much, Doctor. Thank you
For
so
me as
much.
well. Thank you very much. Really, I mean it.
yeah, thank you. And
Thank you.
Hope to
please
connect
come
again
back
in the
anytime.
future.
Yeah, come back
Me too.
anytime. We have a lot of rooms that are maybe too late for you because it's 9 p.m. EST, but we have in between rooms from European speakers. So on Monday at 9 p.m. we have Dr. Salamat. He's an exogeologist, so he is a geologist that looks at how things could be in other planets, and he found a new form of ice with different pressure and temperature playing around that could be existing in this way in other planets in the universe. And he will talk also about other metals and so on that they are working on simulating how they, and then they do the lab experiment.
Hopefully
And
it's not Ice 9, right? That mythical molecule.
I don't know, you can ask him on Monday
He
then.
mentioned metallic hydrogen, which I was
Yeah,
like,
that is really
whoa.
cool. Yeah, it will be a really cool presentation. Then Dr. Lenz will presenting Human Evolutionary Distinctiveness, his latest publication. Then we have Dr. Liang talking about how he created carbon negative production of acetone and isopropanol, which is kind of more climate related room. And um, Dr. Morin will talk about ADHD and elevated levels of hoarding in ADHD and that work. And then we'll have Dr. Emre coming to talk about this really cool new research about the nasal spray that stops memory decay and Alzheimer's. I'm very excited about that on Friday. And then on Saturday at the same time, we started today at 1 p.m. EST, we'll have the Dr. Marco Pettini. We talk about the paper that was posted by my mistake, about long distance electrodynamic intermolecular forces. So he's a really nice person and a really wonderful scientist. So I'm also really excited to have him. And yeah, thank you so much again. This was a wonderful room, Paschalis. I really appreciate.
Thank you
Evkaristo,
all.
Paschalis.
Thank you, folks. Have a nice rest of the day.
Thanks, you too.
For your weekend,
Have a great
Thank
evening.
Doctor.
you.
Bye, everyone.
Much respect, everyone. Bye,
Oh
everyone.
yeah, and tomorrow we have the weekly recap at this time at 1 p.m. EST. So if you missed rooms throughout the week, we'll give like a short summary version, like in 1 hour room where we just summarize what we heard and give people another opportunity to like listen in and ask a few questions. So if you missed rooms, or didn't get to ask a question, if we can answer them, we'll be happy to do that. So, okay, bye. Now,
Bye.
3,
Bye.
Bye.
1, bye everyone.